Welcome to the Health Center for Addictions Research and Cancer Prevention. This is our webinar that's being put on behalf of the Investigator Development Corps to discuss our new pilot grant program. And so hopefully this will answer any questions that you have as it relates to submitting a strong application to our pilot grant program. But before we get started, I want to give you some background around what the purpose of this pilot grant is. First off, we know from NSF data that racial and ethnic minorities, women, individuals with disabilities, those from disadvantaged backgrounds are really underrepresented in the health sciences. And we really need to diversify the health sciences workforce in order to put together a more diverse field of scientists that are really interested in pursuing health equity science. And in that space, we're putting together some very strong hands-on mentoring and a pilot grant experience that is really designed to provide a pathway for research independence. And then ultimately provide an efficient incubator to think about team science approach to addressing health disparities and cancer prevention in not only Houston and Texas, but across the US as well. Some of the logistics that are associated with this pilot grant program, if you look at the RFA, you can see that it's due on January 8th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. These are time limited pilot grants, and so we really need the work to happen within a 12-month time period. They have a nice budget ranging from $30,000 to $50,000, and based on how much is budgeted, we'll be able to fund anywhere from 3 to 5 each funding cycle. And our funding cycle is once a year. The funding decisions hopefully will be made by March 5th, which will give us an earliest start date of March 15th. But understand that this may take some time because these are going to be official pilot grants funded by the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities. And so there's going to be some time to get this stuff set up in the NIH system, in addition to time needed to do any sort of regulatory compliance checks as well. From an eligibility standpoint, it's important to note that postdoctoral fellows are eligible, and any UH faculty member that has budgeted research time is eligible. So that could be your tenure track faculty, or even your clinical faculty that has budgeted research time as well. The reason why the budgeted research time is extremely important because of the deliverables. And so you're going to have some expectation of publishing and expectation of presenting the results and expectation of pursuing larger funding mechanisms at the completion of the pilot grant program. Some of the preferences that we have align with the first slide that I went over, and really just want to give some preference to early stage investigators, folks that are within 10 years of receiving their PhD, and groups underrepresented in the health sciences. Again, really just trying to jumpstart that pipeline and help sort of transcend some of the discipline silos. And so we really want to look for strong investigative teams that have used a team science approach to have a range of investigator experience that go beyond a single department. So we really want you to look across departments, across colleges, and even outside of U of H to the extent that it makes sense to do so. Ultimately, we really want to see collaborations, and whether that's collaborations across academic units, but even collaborations that include people in the community. And so looking for applications that have worked with community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, local churches, looking at folks that are looking at working with service providers, whether it's FQHC that has a history of working with health disparity populations across Texas, and also looking for things that are responsive to NIMHD, which is our funding agency, and folks that are really trying to make a breakthrough in addictions and cancer prevention research. The grant application has a cover page. This cover page can be downloaded on our website. You can go to the HRI's website, or you can go to the healthrcmi.com website. This cover page has basic demographic information that we need to enter into our systems. We want a specific aims page. This is a typical one-page NIH-style aims page with some caveats. I mean, we want you to obviously say what the specific aims of the pilot project will be, but we also want you to cover, what are some of the breakthroughs that you're trying to make in addictions and cancer prevention. And obviously it can be addictions or cancer prevention, but if you can relate the two, even better. We want to look at what specific health disparities are being investigated. What's the mechanism involved? What's the population? What's the epidemiological data that shows that this group is being disproportionately affected by whatever that's being studied? And also, have you put some thought into transitioning this mechanism into a developmentally appropriate NIH funding mechanism? And so, what is your plan for turning this pilot grant into a funded NIH project? We also will get input from our community advisory board. And within this space, they're going to be looking at, the relevance of this pilot grant program with the mission of the RCMI. They're going to look at, the public health narrative, how will this make a potential impact into the community? Who are your community partners? And do you even have a dissemination plan around how you're going to get the results back into the community so that they can benefit for participating if it involves human subjects, as an example? We want you to spend some time writing a thorough research strategy. This will mirror almost like an R03 application from NIH, where that's typically a 5-page mechanism. We have truncated this to be a 4-page mechanism, but we still want you to focus on the significance, innovation, and approach. The significance as it relates to, what you're trying to address, what public health crisis or challenge are you trying to pursue? What are some of the innovation that you're going to bring to bear so that we can get beyond an incremental growth in whatever it is that you're studying and really be transformative in our thinking. And ultimately, the approach, which is going to detail the design, the execution, dissemination, the team, and data analytic plan, and so forth. Obviously, we want references. We're not going to put a page limit on references, but we do want you to put some thought into what types of resources can the RCMI provide you. And in this space, we really encourage you to go to our website and look at some of the services that are provided by the Research Infrastructure Core and the Community Engagement Core. This could be anything from access to laboratory facilities and equipment to access to personnel with specific expertise. It could be maybe biostatistics support. Thinking about, ways in which the community can help provide feedback on your research design or on your recruitment materials. Whatever it is that we offer, we encourage you to look at our website in detail how you might be able to leverage some of those resources to execute your proposed pilot grant. If human subjects are involved, we want you to use an NIH format, and so use the plan enrollment table that you can download from the NIH website. From a budget template standpoint, we want you to work with your DBA and use the University of Houston's budget template. But please pay careful attention to the RFA, where we detail specific allowable costs and unallowable costs. On a big sort of high level, just keep in mind, obviously you can fund students and any kind of staff support, but we really don't want to see faculty salary support put onto the pilot grant program. Hopefully you can use some of your budgeted research time to do some of the work that you want to propose. Any kind of laboratory materials, software, things of that nature, obviously are within the allowable budget cost. If you need any access to electronics or computers, please get in touch with me before you budget those. We may already have access to some of that. Understand that this is not an IDC bearing pilot grant program, so you won't be able to budget IDC, you won't be able to purchase equipment, but just go through the RFA where we detail what the allowable and unallowable costs are. Obviously, we want a very detailed budget justification where you describe why you're requesting budget for the components that you're seeking funding for. We want all key personnel to submit an NIH or NSF formatted biosketch. And please put together a facilities and resource page so it's very clear that you have access to what you need in order to execute the pilot grant that's being proposed. Once you're done, we want you to compile this into a single PDF file and email it to our center at healthrcmi@central.uh.edu. But before you do that, we want you to think about how your application will actually be reviewed. We're going to use a standard NIH scoring system where 1 is high impact, all the way through a 9, which is low impact. The reviewers are going to be very strongly encouraged to use the whole range so we can spread our scores, and hopefully the strongest applications will rise to the top. They'll be scoring the overall impact while also giving criterion scores as it relates to the significance, the investigative team, particularly as it relates to a strong team science approach to what is being proposed, any innovation that's being proposed, the approach, details put into that, scientific environment in which the facilities and resources articulate. But we also have two additional review criteria, one of them being, to what extent is this pilot grant program relevant to the RCMI? This is obviously going to be reviewed by our community advisory board. It's going to inform their funding recommendations. In addition to, what is the potential to make a scientific breakthrough if the aims are actually achieved? And more specifically, can this really translate into a fundable NIH mechanism that is developmentally appropriate for the team that is involved? In this review process, we're going to, put a standard NIH review process together. We'll have a scientific review group. Instead of the top 50% that will be reviewed and discussed, we're actually going to discuss the top 16 applications, regardless of how many are submitted. And so what's unique about our review process is we're actually going to invite the PIs the opportunity to present their application to the scientific review group in about a 10 to 15-minute presentation, followed by a Q&A, where you'll be able to really showcase what you're trying to do in the work that's being presented. It also provides the review group to ask questions that maybe they had when they reviewed the grant so that things could be clarified. Once this presentation is over, you'll be dismissed from the room, and then the group will have 10 minutes to sort of further refine their thinking as it relates to strengths and weaknesses experienced from the application and the presentation. Consistent with NIH review process, anyone that has a conflict of interest will be excused from the room, and they will not be allowed to participate in the scoring of that particular application. Given COVID-19 and other challenges, this is going to be virtual presentations, and so all this will take place via a Zoom meeting platform. Finally, at the end of the meeting, the reviewers will submit their overall impact scores for everything that was discussed in this meeting. And that information will be given to our community advisory board, in addition to some of the very specific components that we're asking them to focus on, so that they can give funding recommendations to us as it relates to the top 3 to 5 pilot grant programs that we should invest in. Once the determination is made that we want to fund your application, we're going to have to go through the standard compliance reviews, whether it's, ICOOC or IRB, whatever institutional regulatory compliance reviews that need to take place. And these will happen before we release the funding. And then we also have to begin the paperwork of getting this submitted into the NIH system, so it shows up as an NIMHD funded pilot grant and ERA Commons. We're going to request quarterly reporting because this is a 12-month time-intensive program. We want to make sure that you're on schedule and meeting your milestones. We want to know if you're experiencing any challenges, but we also want to know if there are specific resources that we have access to that can help you strengthen whatever is taking place at that moment in time. And so we want to make sure that you have everything that you need in order to be successful during this 12-month funding period. We want you to engage our Community Research Advisory Board. The CRAB is embedded in our Community Engagement Core, and that would be a really strong resource in thinking about ways in which you can get participation or recruitment and retention, or thinking about flyers for recruitment, thinking about ways in which you can disseminate your findings back into the communities that are being targeted so they can benefit in a real way for the work that you're doing. We're going to have innovation research talks where we want you to present your science. We want you to present your preliminary data. We want you to present, what is your big idea that this pilot grant is going to transition to, and get feedback from our CRAD, get feedback from scientists who have expertise in the areas in which you're working in, get feedback from community stakeholders so that we could think about ways of really strengthening your potential to turn this pilot grant into a funded NIH funding mechanism. Ultimately, the capstone of the pilot grant program is to submit an NIH grant within 6 months of the completion of the pilot grant program. We want you to think about budgeting some funding to get expert review so that your grant application can be pre-reviewed and revised before even submitting it to the NIH. So hopefully you can get in touch with us so that we can answer some of these questions and provide you with supports and recommendations on that front. But we also want you to know that we expect that you work with us to submit these applications through our center, which allows us to be able to document the progress that you're making and also the outcomes of, the work that you've invested into this pilot grant program. Hopefully we can transition these into very good success stories that will be news that we can share with the NIMHD. But ultimately, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Oliveria Nessick Taylor. She's the director of the Investigator Development Corps, or you can send me an email as the PI of the NIMHD RCMI U54. If you need staff assistance, please don't hesitate to email our staff at healthrcmi@central.uh.edu. And ultimately, we really look forward to reading your applications, and we look forward to learning about your ideas and thinking about ways in which we could assist you in that pathway to research independence. Again, thank you, and we look forward to reading your applications.